Philia means daughter. We are the daughters of the women who came before us, and we fight so that our daughters may be free. We are a women-led volunteer organization. Our vision is a world free from patriarchy, where all women and girls are liberated. We seek to contribute to the women's liberation movement by building sisterhood and solidarity among women, locally, nationally, and globally. By amplifying the voices of women, particularly those less often heard or purposefully silenced, and by defending women's human rights.
Dear visitors, thank you for coming today to the FiLiA webinar, Sex Trade Survivors Demanding the Global Change. I am Luba Fine from FiLiA. 13 survivors from 12 different countries are taking part in this webinar. I am going to introduce our last speaker for today, and she's also my personal friend, Grizelda Grootboom from South Africa. She is a role model and an inspiration for many women. Grizelda survived homelessness, sex trafficking, and prostitution as a child during the apartheid era. Many women in her situation give up, and we cannot blame them. But Grizelda didn't. She survived, recovered, and kept fighting. In 2016, she published her groundbreaking book, Exit, in which she revealed her life journey and the process of exiting prostitution. I love this book so much. Let me narrate a part of it. Thank you. This is the book. What do I tell people who ask me who I am? I say, I'm a recovered drug addict. What drove me to drugs and prostitution was the anger and pain I felt after being gang raped at the age of 9. I did not choose to be a prostitute because I liked or wanted drugs. I was also not forced into sex work. Some activist groups advocate that prostitution should be decriminalized because girls and boys are forced into this exploitation. But I feel strongly that we must recognize the social conditions that exist in our communities and support this type of exploitation. There were circumstances that led to my engagement in sex work and drugs, and I met those conditions before I was trafficked. After I was abandoned by my guardians at the age of 9, I was raped by the members of the community gang. The community knew how the boys behaved, but did not act against them. Instead, they painted my mother's house in shame, which cast me out of the Khayelitsha community. I was pushed to live under the bridge in Cape Town with other street people, and she was 9 years old by that time. It was while I was trying to escape this life, I was trafficked by someone I thought was a good friend. So my prostitution was never due to force, but to the social circumstances that make children like me ripe for exploitation. My rape happened in the comforts of my community. My trafficking happened within the comfort of friendship. Violence against women exists at all levels. Thank you so much, Griselda, for joining us today. Your knowledge and your wisdom are vital in our struggle. Yes, please.
Thank you so much. It's such a big blessing. It's like I'm in tears because we finally survivors have our own platform, right? And we're not going to be told how to speak or express.
I'm going to introduce our last speaker for today. And she's also my personal friend, Grizelda Grootboom from South Africa. She is a role model and an inspiration for many women. Griselda survived homelessness, sex trafficking, and prostitution as a child during the apartheid era. Many women in her situation give up, and we cannot blame them. But Griselda didn't. She survived, recovered, and kept fighting. In 2016, she published her groundbreaking book, Exit, in which she revealed her life journey and the process of exiting prostitution. I love this book so much. Let me narrate a part of it. Thank you. This is the book. I read it so many times. What do I tell people who ask me who I am? I say, I'm a recovered drug addict. What drove me to drugs and prostitution was the anger and pain I felt after being gang raped at the age of 9. I did not choose to be a prostitute because I liked or wanted drugs. I was also not forced into sex work. Some activist groups advocate that prostitution should be decriminalized because girls and boys are forced into this exploitation. But I feel strongly that we must recognize the social conditions that exist in our communities and support this type of exploitation. There were circumstances that led to my engagement in sex work and drugs, and I met those conditions before I was trafficked. After I was abandoned by my guardians at the age of 9, I was raped by the members of the community gang. The community knew how the boys behaved, but did not act against them. Instead, they painted my mother's house in shame, which cast me out of the Khayelitsha community. I was pushed to live under the bridge in Cape Town with other street people, and she was 9 years old by that time. It was while I was trying to escape this life, I was trafficked by someone I thought was a good friend. So my prostitution was never due to force, but to the social circumstances that make children like me ripe for exploitation. My rape happened in the comforts of my community. My trafficking happened within the comfort of friendship. Violence against women exists at all levels. Thank you so much, Griselda, for joining us today. Your knowledge and your wisdom are vital in our struggle. Yes, please.
Thank you so much. It's such a big blessing. It's like, I'm in tears because we finally survivors have our own platform, right? And we're not going to be told how to speak or express. And being in South Africa or being in Africa, you're extremely lonely as a survivor because the patriarchy culture, African culture, still oppress that. As a survivor of trafficking in South Africa, I think I am probably going through survival of survival right now, being pushed back of what voice I should bring and who do I think I am to say that it shouldn't be legalized. I get bashed by political parties, by lobby health organizations. And I think what Yola was just saying right now is that that's exactly what we go through. Also, just the most insane experience after the United Nations speech. I think that was the most depressing speech I've ever had to do because the whole room just smelled for me like semen, you know? I mean, being locked up in a house for 2 weeks, duct tape around my eyes, injected with crystal meth behind my knees, my lower body being low, and just men taking turns, right? And not feeling any need of what would this do 20 years down the line? And in the 20 years down the line of being sexually exploited, you still have to look behind your back because there were so many porn movies done in torture. And in Africa, in South Africa, gender-based violence, sex trafficking, human trafficking is literally in translation of this is the only economic space we can get to for women and girls. Today, I still work around the country. We still go into brothels, we still go into, like Yola was saying, so-called public houses that the government gives pimps and pretend to say, you know, he's going to take care of the survivors. And, you know, 6 months down the lane, you get a victim that's 9 years old, smelling like semen, having condoms in her, and not wanting to get out of under the table and prefer just to do suicidal right there. And that's the rescue plan that we have in South Africa today. That's the rescue plan. And I'm so happy that the report came out of human trafficking in South Africa is downgraded, because they are literally just undermining our voices. And I don't know if I can say our, because I think I've been probably prostituted lip service on political platforms to discuss human trafficking, but in those spaces, I was insulted to the highest. The highest was, I'm just angry because when I was working for a brothel, 28 years old in Port Elizabeth, surprisingly, I got pregnant with my baby girl. And I thought that's when the madam will kick me out. And she didn't, right? And I got pregnant until 6 months, and I was still working because the customers were so happy of the pressure of summer on my vagina. But because of 6 months and I was a Black woman in a white brothel, they made sure they hired a doctor to come to the brothel and remove summer. And then 3 hours later, I was asked to take sponges and hold the blood. And that's when I thought, this is it, you know, they can continue to do what they do best. And today, I mean, health-wise, because of that unwanted abortion, because of that torture, the embarrassment to still sit in places and talk about it and feel your body going into a physical health trauma and wet yourself, and knowing that that is frustrating you, and you're sitting in a health conference meeting where people are discussing what they should legalize for women and girls, and you're sitting there and you're thinking the whole room of men were the clients that was in the brothel that I worked at. So it is such a blessing just sitting with survivors and be able to just to pour out the pain and the strain in this fight in South Africa. I know that today it is, you know, a lot of support by a lot of global organizations. That's how this is important this day, because South African organizations is just, Griselda, come and share your ideas so we can write it down, but there's no solution every year. I still stay in Khayelitsha, which is the same informal place. I stay still in an environment where in Cape Town, when they have the most incredible, beautiful conferences, Uber drivers come to my community and put signs up and say they're looking for girls. And the police is aware of my existence. The police is aware of my environment, but still those girls disappear. And today, just we sit with girls that has abortion in these houses and just want to escape pain and continue because there's no rescue plan. The sex trafficking in South Africa, they do not want to put the two together. They don't want to put prostitution and sex trafficking together. They have tried in all documents to translate and narrate my words into a space of saying it's a need, but it's also a manageable need. And I am a full-blown abolitionist. I have been in partnerships with so organization, but there's a soul in me with faces of women and girls that died in the rooms that we were kept. And they would OD over drugs because their bodies couldn't make it. And then you go and check on the girl and she's out and nobody cares. So I will never agree on legalization of prostitution. I will never agree on decriminalization. I will just agree in saying when the government tells me we are shutting down brothels, we are taking whatever pimps we get and we are going to start prosecuting and opening cases. And that's when we can start discussing why should we manage consent adult prostitution to legalize prostitution in decriminalization in its legalizing. But for now, around the world, we have countries where girls are just being brought into South Africa because the language to the world in South Africa is that, no, we are allowing you to have your human rights as an individual. So even if a woman that is having adult sex at the age of 32, she can still bring her daughter from Ghana and Senegal, that 16-year-old, and come and sell it to a pimp, and that will be okay. And that's the language and the misunderstanding on legalizing and not wanting to link sex trafficking in prostitution in South Africa right now. In South Africa, we have, I don't know, thousands and thousands government health doctors with private practice that is pushing that government should legalize prostitution. The only way we can deal with gender-based violence and what we call in South Africa called rape culture is let's legalize the fantasy and the need of men to say, let's legalize prostitution, and not forgetting that there are going to be cracks between these laws. I totally understand. Let's start with a certain equality law that maybe will open the eyes of governments and policymakers, but no. I grew up on the street because of government. I never asked government to come and remove me. I became a street kid at a very young age because of government. Not because I was a drug kid, not because my parents abused me, no, because of government. And because of that foundation, I ended up in sexual exploitation and all the higher level of torture against women and girls. So for me to sit and be a woman in a country in South Africa and still feel, oh no, let's just speak nicely for the sake so that the government can hear us. I refuse to do that language as a survivor. I refuse to even be saying, let's do this collectively so that we can just get a footstep in the door with policymakers in Geneva or wherever so we can decide how to tackle sex trafficking and prostitution. I refuse. As long as they're trying to separate the two, as long as MSC trying to separate the two and saying prostitution and sex trafficking is not happening, because in Africa right now, women and girls are being trafficked because the world is saying, let's legalize prostitution. And that trafficking through the geographicalness of them traveling through the oceans and containers and trucks and no waters, along the way, the 10% of those women die. And nobody cares. Nobody comes up with the statistics. Oh, we have found at least about 20 underage Syrian young girls dead in the ocean because they were trafficked by, one of the minister's friends as a pimp to bring girls through to Italy. Nobody talks about that. It's just, oh no, we know that. It's just numbers. We know. Nobody's names. None of those girls' names gets recognized. And I always ask these officials, every time you tap into a porn site, do you know if she consented to that? You have to deal with your nervous system so many times when you sit on platforms to fight for a change. And all you get every time is seeing the girls that you have experienced this journey with and have not made it to life. So as a survivor around the country and also a founder of Survivor Exit Foundation in my community, this year, I have started just to sort of assist the women and the girls in my community by giving an after school program, which is netball, where we take time and we just sit and make it a safe space and discuss. And if we feel uncomfortable, we go into the field and talk. And at the same time, Survivor Exit Foundation is really, really looking forward for a full global collaboration with international survivors to be able to make some noise in Africa and say, we do have African survivors of sex trafficking and prostitution, and we would love the platform to speak. And that's what we're struggling with in South Africa right now. I get undermined and taken as a weakness every time I cry. And it is not that, it's because I'm trying to deal with the anger and confusion of what the world is thinking about women and girls in sex trafficking and prostitution. And it is not the weakness, it is because up to today, we're still dealing every day with women and girls of sex trafficking. And sometimes I get so mad, like I said at the United Nations, put a face to the documents that you keep on reading from organizations. Just try to put a face. Put a face from a girl from Mexico, put a face, a girl from Ghana, just put a face in that document, and maybe the humanity in you will understand that women and girls also have the right to speak against sexual exploitation. And their advice and expertise on this is the only way to rescue women and girls in that. Thank you so much. And I'm so sorry. It's PMS month. I'm having my monthly periods, and that alone, health-wise, after this sexual exploitation is insane. And just being here with you guys, going through that PMS and monthly pain, and it is fulfilling, it's reviving, and I know I can go another 10 years further and continue to fight this struggle that we have to deal with. And hopefully it will never be a struggle by the time we all step in Beijing 23 and say, hello, we're done with the struggle, we want the solution. Can we have solution? And thank you very much. God bless, ladies, and I love you.
Thank you so much, Griselda, for being here with us. You are such an inspiration. I haven't mentioned that, but Griselda is also a motivational speaker today. And I can understand how she motivates other women to be a little bit stronger, to have, she's passing some of her energy, some of her enthusiasm, some of her strength. Thank you. Thank you so much for being with us, being in our struggle, being in this panel. Thank you for everything. Griselda, in the current legal situation in South Africa is that brothels are criminalized, right?
Yeah. It is, but it is also, as you describe in Israel, there is, but it's not implemented. So it hasn't been signed off by the president. It's just been voiced on platforms and, you know, gatherings. So people do, the health department, they get called in most of the time to discuss, and they feel like when they hear whatever the president would say on the human rights, it's your right to be, it's your right to sell your body. That's when they use and go and just continue. Like in KwaZulu-Natal, Durban, the health department there have gone ahead to put out clinic mobile buses to assist women on the street that can sell. And they only identify obviously as sex works, which is a name that came up with one of the activists, and that was the terminology. As much as we keep on saying in South Africa, that cannot be the terminology because the pimps made it up, right? They said it's work and it's work of sex. So they take it from prostitution because they say we are laboring the women, discriminating the women. And again, that's a lobby paid media narrative communication from pimps and brothels. So they can keep on normalizing more and more. So in South Africa right now, you could say it's on the table in front of the president and the organization that's close by. They get to hear how he might and he might not. The ANC Women's League's position on it is yes, let's legalize it. So that position in it helps the health department and the organizations that are lobbying for it in the country. So there's no law, but there is a voice and discussion and debate around the law. And that's what we as survivors in Africa and South Africa would like to say. But you have not discussed with survivors this particular law, and you haven't discussed with public. We haven't met any public agreement, but why is it still being implemented here and there? So for us as survivors, and for like half of my country are not even aware that there might be a legalization of prostitution in South Africa. If it is, it should be decriminalization, and then embrace dignity also come with partial decrim, and that's when they bring the Nordic law to say, can we deal just with the pimps and the buyers? And for me, that's a massive problem in South Africa and Africa, because if we're gonna go and deal with a pimp and a buyer that has a brothel in the central of every province, he's automatically just going to be bailed out, or he's automatically just going to wipe it off. Like there's no follow through when it comes to catching a pimp that sells sex under, the only time we get an opportunity to step in if they tell us there's a missing person under 16 that might be end up in sexual exploitation in these areas. And that's when we come in and then find, oh, it's a brothel. So with that practicality and theory, it's not, and I think I agree with Lena, it feels like for a survivor, we don't have a law. It hasn't been signed off, it hasn't been told. But there is this narrative and normalization language that's going for, and some acts from certain lobby organization. I don't know if it does make sense around it. But everybody is going for the decriminalization. Myself and with Embracing, we're going for partial, because we feel like the police, when they still beat the women up, they still lock the women up, they still take the money from the women, and then they rape them and they throw them back on the streets. So that's the criminality side of decrim or partial decrim from those who are for it. So I don't know if that makes a great sense to you. That's what is going on in South Africa for me.
Thank you very much, Griselda, for your answer.
There has been this thing called xenophobia, that we are apparently disagreeing on bringing African people to South Africa, and we are like the, whatever they call it, the heart of the African continent. But governments, mostly African governments, are literally using that to find a way not to even have a passport in Africa when you travel back and forth in South Africa. And then the Home Affairs said to us, when that happens, then we will be able to be at airports and see if full motivational letters are for parents to carry their kids. And now that has caused so many men to traffic girls from Africa in our neighboring countries into South Africa. And then at the end of a month and so, you find them into one of the refugee camps because the girl has ran away from the pimp. And now she gets immigrant discriminated from government because there's no so-called like parents next to her, because she ran away when she figured out, oh, I'm being trafficked. And now they end up in these immigrant camps in South Africa and in Cape Town, especially one in Cape Town. So that's the same thing that we're also having people trying to push of, let's just give the women and girls a pass. And for us in South Africa, a lot of Africa, top North Africa men traffic women and girls and then come back and marry South African women so they can have papers to be able to travel back and forth in South Africa and traffic girls. So that alone becomes a battle for us when we say, and I think government just doesn't want to do the work around ending, the trafficking through our borders. Because one thing we've questioned is our borders. Why is our borders so weak? Why is our borders not really checking verification documents? And then we have the same problem that all my sisters are having around the world with this issue of documentation and letting women and girls in with fake documentation or with documentation from government to sort of push this narrative in other countries to sell their bodies.
Thank you, Griselda. Thank you, everyone. So
thank you. I love you, Lena.
I love you too.
Have a nice day, guys.